Welcome to CVine News. You're listening to The Truth with your host, Linda Forsythe.
Saudi Arabia's role in 9/11 and why the U.S. government has kept it hidden. That is the title of the 90-minute video that was created by the attorney representing the victims and family members of 9/11, Jim Kreindler. Now, he made this video on October 28, 2019. And even though that was 2 years ago, you need to remember that date because that date and the reason he decided to make that video is critical. This is Linda Forsythe from CVine News, and you are listening to KTIE Radio on AM 590. Be aware this radio show has also been made into a video that you can watch on cvine.com or on our YouTube and Rumble channels. Those both include the actual visual documentation and video clips from this radio show. Today on part 2 of our GTMO silent running video documentary, we will be playing back key elements of the explosive statements Jim Kreindler makes, again, 2 years ago on October 28, 2019. You may want to take notes. These statements are earth-shattering, and they appear to have been drowned out by a blizzard of misinformation from other sources, sensationalism. And somehow this isn't a major thing. And it certainly isn't something mainstream media has been covering, but it's something all Americans should be aware of, and they should listen to this gentleman very, very carefully. He doesn't sensationalize anything that's in the video that he makes, which, by the way, I will be leaving a link in the actual subject line, but you can listen to it on your own, the entire thing. I'm just going to be doing clips. He lays out the facts piece by piece. Let's get started.
Clearly, he knows what he's doing, both in the political arena as well as in the courtroom. And with that, Jim, why don't you tell us your story and your findings?
Thank you, Dan. You know, it's always a great pleasure for me to be back at Dartmouth. And I'm here with my wife, which makes it even more fun. But to talk to you in this room dedicated to my dad about our life's work, Pan Am 103 and 9/11, is especially gratifying. Walking over here, we passed Silsby when I was here, and I was class of 77. That was, and I think still is, the government building. And like many government majors, I, at the time, had an abiding faith and belief in the integrity and efficacy of our government. Talking to you now, I'll make a prediction. By the time we're done, you will be revolted and horrified to learn what prominent members of our government, including past presidents, have done. You will be equally amazed and thrilled with the courage and determination of a few private citizens and former FBI agents who have beaten the government and defeated the largest lobby effort in the world's history. To begin with 9/11, you know, as Dan said, when all of you came in the room, if asked, well, what did Saudi Arabia have to do with 9/11? The first thing you'd say is 15 of the 19 hijackers were Saudi nationals. Some of you who pay particular attention to this might also make the comment that Dan made, and Saudi Arabia has been known to give money to charities who in turn funded Al-Qaeda. But the fact is, 9/11 was an attack on the United States with the active intent and cooperation from 11 known Saudi government officials. Saudi Arabian government officials were the accomplices without whom there never could have been a 9/11 attack. And I'm going to give you a little information about that. The starting place, I guess, is why would Saudi Arabia support al-Qaeda? Osama bin Laden is Sunni, et cetera. And to understand that, we have to go back to 1979. Most of you with the same hair color as me will remember that year. I was in my third year of law school. The current students obviously will not. But 1979 was a wake-up call to the world and the Islamic world in particular. Two cataclysmic events happened. The Shah of Iran was overthrown, something that seemed unthinkable at the time, by radical Shiite Muslims. And in the same year, the mosque in Mecca was taken over by Wahhabi radicals. Now, the House of Saud was built in partnership with the founder of Wahhabism. But until, and you must remember that the king of Saudi Arabia, now King Salman, in Arabic, his title is the keeper and protector of the holy mosques. The word king doesn't appear in his Arabic title. When that happened, the royal family had an oh my God moment. If the Shah can be overthrown and Wahhabi radicals can take over the mosque, we are next unless we take dramatic action. And that event prompted the royal family to deliberately start accommodating the Wahhabi mullahs. They did it in two ways. Sometime later, they created a new branch of the Saudi government called the Ministry of Islamic Affairs. The Ministry of Islamic Affairs is dedicated to the spread of Wahhabism internationally. And every embassy and consulate in the world has Ministry of Islamic Affairs officials embedded in it, as well as foreign ministry, intelligence, what have you. The second thing to keep in mind is the nature of the Saudi Arabian government. You all know that there are many members of the royal family. Well, how do you get ahead there? How do you become foreign minister, defense minister, deputy crown prince, or king? They don't have elections. The way in which you rise to prominence and power in Saudi Arabia is to seek and obtain the support of the Wahhabi mullahs. So every prominent person in Saudi Arabia, King Salman, his predecessor, all made their pilgrimages to kiss bin Laden's ring in Kandahar. Without doing that, they would not have the internal support they needed to rise into positions of power. In my mind, it's not so much affinity with Wahhabism that prompts the leaders of Saudi Arabia to support bin Laden, who is not a black sheep by any means. Just as an aside, one of his close relatives on 9/11 is working in the Washington, D.C. embassy as an embassy official and the head of one of the Saudi charities that are supporting al-Qaeda. What did these Saudi officials do? They had supported al-Qaeda not just with money, but with the logistical support al-Qaeda needed to mount the 9/11 attacks and the Cole bombing before it. Those of you who are our age remember the embassy bombings? Okay. Before we get to 9/11, it's worth remembering, something you and I talked about at lunch, Why did bin Laden turn from an ally of the United States fighting the Russians to the vitriolic hatred of the United States? In my mind, the number one reason that caused him to despise us was the presence of U.S. military troops, particularly female troops, in Saudi Arabia after we were protecting Kuwait and the Emirates and Saudi Arabia from Saddam Hussein. So for many years before 9/11, you had Saudi government officials working with Al-Qaeda and coordinating with Al-Qaeda. What happened on 9/11? The two lead hijackers, Hazmi and Midhar, attended, toward the end of 1999, attended a convention, a conference in Malaysia of Al-Qaeda and other terrorists at which the 9/11 attack was planned, as well as the Cole attack. These terror attacks all emanated from a tragic event in 1988. How many of you remember when the USS Vincennes shot down the Iranian Airbus mistakenly, killing 300 plus people? So Iran vowed revenge. The plot to destroy 10 US commercial air carriers was called the Bojinka plot, a plot that Khalid Sheikh Mohammed knew about and tried to implement. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed's nephew, Ramzi Youssef, was the convicted bomber of the 1993 attack on the World Trade Center. 9/11 was a combination of the Bojinka plot to destroy 10 U.S. aircraft with the attack on the World Trade Center in 93. The World Trade Center, of course, is seen as a symbol of American capitalism, particularly Jewish American capitalism. And that's why it was such a potent target for bin Laden. And our intelligence community knew all this. There's no secret about about the Bojinka plot and bin Laden's antipathy toward the United States and the support of Saudi government officials. So where did this all begin? The fall of '99, Hazmi and Midhar are in Malaysia planning the 9/11 attack along with other terrorists and the Cole attack. They were monitored by the CIA daily. From Malaysia, after their planning was complete, they went on a holiday that had particular appeal to two radical Wahhabist, soon-to-be suicide murderers who were on their way to heaven in a couple years. So they went on a sex vacation to Bangkok. The CIA monitored them there. From Bangkok, they arrived in Los Angeles January 15th, 2000. CIA monitored their flight and their arrival. Before January 15th, 2000, a high-ranking official in the Saudi embassy, whose name I know, and because of the disgusting protective orders imposed upon us by the Justice Department with the blessing of the court, I can't tell my clients, one of whom is in this room. This official sent an instruction to a Saudi consular official in Los Angeles, Thumairi, ordering him to provide the help that Hazmi and Midhar needed. They didn't speak a word of English. They wouldn't know the exit sign from the entrance sign. So Thumairi and his accomplice, who is a Saudi intelligence official.
We're going to stop in just a few minutes to hear a word from our sponsor. This is Linda Forsythe from CBI News on AM 590 KTIE.
What is CVINE anyway? The acronym CVINE stands for Community Voices, Investigations, News, and Education. CVINE is a grassroots collection of people from all walks of life, skills, and talents, banding together to heal our community. As a group of law enforcement, retired military, accountants, teachers, doctors, nurses, clergy, stay-at-home moms, or the local construction worker, CVINE donates their time where needed. It is we the people who built America. From generations of blood, sweat, and tears, CVINE creates teams to tackle work where it is needed. All volunteers have their own businesses or personal lives, but donate their time in an area they have experience and skills. The news portion of CVINE investigates existing news stories by licensed investigators. CVINE journalists report the news live on social media. CVINE also has commentary and analysis recorded on AM radio. Watch for news teams now being formed in the education sector called Project Mayberry, coming very soon. Visit the cvine.com website, become a member, and sign up for CVINE's newsletter. That's c-vine.com, c-vine.com.
AM 590, The Answer.
Welcome back to AM 590, KTIE Radio. This is Linda Forsythe. We will resume our recording with Jim Kreindler, attorney for the victims and family members of 9/11.
They didn't speak a word of English. They wouldn't know the exit sign from the entrance sign. So Thumeri and his accomplice, who was a Saudi intelligence official, Bayoumi, arranged with people who were working with them. And this is an interesting thing. Al-Qaeda has had and still has today operatives in the United States. In California, in LA, they needed blue-eyed, blonde-haired surfer dudes who could take Hazmi and Midhar around and teach them how to look and act like Americans. The terrorists were helped by dozens of these people under the control and direction of Saudi government officials. So they were picked up at the airport. They were provided housing near the King Fahd Mosque. That was a center point funded by the then King Fahd. His son came over with $10 million. That was the meeting place for Al-Qaeda. Hazmi and Midhar were given money. Prince Bandar Bush, best friend of George Bush, Saudi ambassador to the United States, his wife, through Bayoumi, gave Hazmi and Midhar $25,000. We have traced the exact money trail from one of the dirty charities under scrutiny into the hands of a Saudi government agent in LA who ran a fake charity who sent the money to Karachi and then ultimately to Mohammed Atta in the Hamburg cell. So the money trail is known. The Saudi government officials, in addition to introducing the two terrorists to other people in the mosque, as I said, started English lessons, gave them money, housing, introduced them to Saudi military pilots who I believe were instrumental in training them to fly jets. They did a little trip to Las Vegas. I don't know, but I believe that they received training from Saudi military pilots in the deserts around Las Vegas. In a short period of time, the FBI was alerted to the presence of Hazmi and Midhar. Hazmi and Midhar, in fact, roomed with an FBI informant. The FBI did not arrest them, did not question them, lost them. The CIA, of course, what they're doing is illegal and was probably under the mistaken approach that they could turn the two and that the two terrorists would help root out Saudi dissidents who the royal family would have exterminated. Later, I'll talk about that. I'll tell you a little bit about Khashoggi and why he was killed. It's not because he was a dissident. It's because of his contact with us. If I don't get to it, remind me. The two terrorists are in the United States, monitored until they're lost by the FBI and the CIA. And of course, 9/11 happens. Bob Mueller became director just, I think, a week or two before 9/11. What happened on 9/11? It was the perfect storm to create the worst and most pervasive cover-up in our nation's history. When President Bush was told about the attack, he was in Sarasota, Florida, reading Horton Does the Who, written by one of our famous alumni, to a kindergarten class when he was told about the attack. The first words out of his mouth was it Saddam? Remember how set he was upon killing Saddam Hussein, who had vowed to kill his father, the previous President Bush. Bandar was maybe his closest friend, been to the ranch in Crawford, Texas, more than anybody else. On 9/11, we were still dependent upon Saudi oil. It's long before fracking. President Bush was set upon using the 9/11 attack as an excuse to go to war with Iraq and kill Saddam Hussein. And who was our most important ally in that war? Saudi Arabia. So immediately, he and those close to him in the White House did not want to hear anything about the Saudi government role in 9/11. On the FBI front, Bob Mueller said, "Oh my God, look at the mess I've inherited and this colossal failure. This cannot see the light of day." You would expect that the top counterterrorism agents in the FBI would be put in charge of the investigation. One of them is now working with us, and he and I are talking together every day. Bassem Youssef was the first Arabic-speaking FBI agent, the first agent to infiltrate al-Qaeda and turn a high-level al-Qaeda operative. He was the FBI legate in Saudi Arabia and had been with the king and knows the Saudis intimately. Was he put in charge of any of the 9/11 flights in their investigations? He was kept away from 9/11. Flight 77, the flight that crashed into the Pentagon, Hazmi and Midhar were two of the terrorists on that flight. Who was put in charge of investigating Flight 77, where Hazmi and Midhar played the most important role in planning the attack with the assistance of Saudi government officials? Who did Bob Mueller pick to run probably the most important of the four flights investigation? Jackie McGuire was a probationary officer 6 months out of Quantico. If you want to institute a cover-up, you need a young, dumb kid who is going to follow orders. Who was his new head of counterterrorism? Michael McGarity, who came from organized crime, and organized crime is a completely different model than terrorism. Michael McGarity is the principal architect today of lying to the families and keeping the documents that we know exist away from us. In LA, Steve Moore was put in charge of a 400-person FBI team looking at the activities of Hazmi and Midhar and looking at Thumeiri, Bayoumi, and the other 9 identified Saudi government officials. Being in LA at 3 a.m. every morning, he would personally call Director Mueller. He did it every 48 hours to update him on the investigation. Mueller is reporting to the President President Bush, for his daily intelligence briefing. Steve Moore is reporting to Director Mueller on the progress they're making in investigating Saudi government officials. Enormous progress was made by the agents in the field in the first 2 or 3 months, until Bob Mueller deputized Michael McGarity and Jackie McGuire to shut them down. Subpoenas that have served would not be followed up. Interviews were canceled. It's over. So when Dan said, why did the 9/11 Commission exonerate Saudi Arabia? Because they were lied to by Robert Mueller under oath in Congress and others who did not want the commission to know what role the Saudi government played, because then Saudi Arabia is our ally in the war against Iraq. And he did not want the world to know about this colossal intelligence and law enforcement failure. The investigation was dead. The agents who were working the case are disgusted, horrified, and after a couple years, when the 9/11 Commission came out, and they know what a lie it is, on their own, they resurrect the investigation. In 2007, they go back to the witnesses and start building the criminal case that every one of them joined the FBI to do, to investigate and prosecute crime, not to be part of lying to America and lying to the families of 3,000 murdered Americans. Their investigation proceeded from 2007 until it was shut down in February, March, and April of 2016. At that point, we had President Obama in the White House and James Comey as director of the FBI. Now, I was a fan until I learned this of President Obama. Joe Biden's a friend. I was his New York chair when he ran for president. My dad and I helped him in 1988 on his campaign. What President Obama did is the most treacherous and outrageous act I know of in our nation's history. President Obama and John Kerry wanted the Iran nuclear deal and the eventual normalization of relations with Iran as their signature foreign policy achievement. And it's a goal we all share. It'd be great if you could get Iran to abandon nuclear weapons and change. What was treasonous is the quid pro quo he entered into with King Salman. The Saudis and the Israelis, Netanyahu, were the strongest opponents to the Iran nuclear deal. Everyone in the room knows there was no shaking Netanyahu in opposing the Iran nuclear deal. But Obama thought he could shake the Saudis and get them to drop their opposition. With their opposition and the Israelis, there was no chance of it passing the Senate. So he cut a deal with King Salman, and his deal was, I will kill the 9/11 litigation if you stand down in opposing the Iran nuclear deal. That deal was struck. As we were mentioning before, when Congress passed JASTA overwhelmingly, Obama vetoed it, the only veto of his presidency that was overridden, and as I said, overridden 98-1, just Harry Reid dissented, and 346-77 in the House. What I thought at the time was that's what Obama did to kill the agent's investigation into 9/11. What I didn't know when JASTA was passed then was what happened in the Bureau. That's when James Comey had Michael McGarity and Jackie McGuire shut down the resurrected FBI investigation. So, being at Dartmouth, the room is filled with smart people, and you're thinking like, how does this guy know any of that? The answer is, after all these years, the agents who have worked the case, many of them have retired, and they've come to us and said, here's what we know. We want to finish what we started when we joined the Bureau. The only way for the truth to come out is for us to join with you. So when we demand documents from the FBI and the Department of Justice, we know exactly what we're looking for. So we have been in a fight, not just with Saudi Arabia, JASTA. Saudi Arabia hired 19 lobby firms, and my estimate is they were paid something between $50 and $100 million a year to lobby against us and kill JASTA. They enlisted veterans and put them up at the Trump Hotel and steak dinners and said, help us get rid of this stupid law, without telling the veterans that they were going to be screwing the 9/11 families, that JASTA was the law the families needed to lift the legal immunity that Saudi Arabia claimed. So we overrode the veto, we beat the Saudi lobbyists, JASTA became law, and we started our lawsuit against Saudi Arabia in 2016, 15 years after we've been engaged in this war. The Saudis were shocked. You know, they've got the king on their side, King Obama. They're spending $50 million. How can a bunch of cripples and widows and orphans hobbling around Congress beat them? So when I said at the beginning, you will be revolted by what our government did, but thrilled with what Americans can accomplish, that is what I'm talking about. Few dozen families saying, we're going to knock on every door and buttonhole senators and congressmen, beat Obama and beat the Saudi lobby. And now I'm waxing patriotic. There's no other country in the world where that could happen. In our battle with Saudi Arabia, not surprisingly, they're lying about the documents and keeping it from us, and they've got a lot of high-priced lawyers, and that's a tough fight. The fight we should not be having is the fight we have on a second front against the FBI and the Department of Justice. We had served FOIA requests, Freedom of Information requests, to get documents we know are in the FBI files on the investigation of the Saudi government officials. Here's some of the answers we got to our FOIA requests early on. The documents you seek contain information about Osama bin Laden. We will not give them to you because of his privacy interest in that information. Another one was, we're not giving you any documents unless you produce death certificates for the 19 terrorists. This is our government. This is coming from the Department of Justice. So we have asked for these files. We've been fighting this fight in court for a year and a half. The FBI has given us some documents, 5 tranches or batches. What they give us has redacted information. So I told you the name of the high Saudi official in Washington, D.C. who tasked Thumairy. That was redacted. And what we have were given under a protective order that precludes us from telling the families and speaking about it publicly. And I'm disgusted with these protective orders, and we're doing whatever we can to overturn them, but the judge is not terribly sympathetic. So we know, for example, that in early 2016, when the investigation was shut down, remember March, April, the agents wrote a big summary on their findings. It's there. It has this vast body of information about who, what, where, and how the Saudi government officials acted as the essential accomplices to al-Qaeda. We've asked for it. We haven't gotten it. The Senate unanimously passed a resolution, Resolution 610, calling upon the declassification and the release of this information. The FBI has ignored how many times do you get the Senate to do anything unanimously now? The FBI has ignored it. The Justice Department has ignored it. I and some of the families were with President Trump on 9/11. The next day, Attorney General Barr invoked state secrets and national security as an excuse to keep the FBI documents hidden. We're fighting that. We have some champions. Tomorrow, Tulsi Gabbard at 1 o'clock will hold a press conference saying release, the information to the families. So luckily, we've got a lot of people, fighting this fight, but we should not have to be fighting our own government. We're making progress in court, but for us to win in court could take another 5 or 10 years. So we're trying to enlist support in Washington for us to get the documents, because if we get the FBI files, the Saudis know the game is up. And probably all of you have been reading about Saudi Arabia's desire to take Aramco public, do the IPO for 5% of the company, a company that will be worth between, depending upon the estimates, 1.3 to $2 trillion, and New York is the preferred venue over Hong Kong or London. So we're operating in Washington to try and get support there, because there's no way that us and the families are going to stand for taking Aramco public 100 yards away from ground zero. So Saudi Arabia has to resolve the 9/11 case for the Aramco IPO in New York to happen, in my opinion. So our fight is on two fronts in court, with Saudi Arabia and with the FBI, and daily interaction with people in Washington who can help us and persuade, MBS, who was 15 when 9/11 occurred, to engage and resolve 9/11. Khashoggi. You want to hear about Khashoggi? Okay. So MBS's younger brother, KBS, was ambassador at age 28, Saudi ambassador to the United States. You may remember after Khashoggi was murdered, the NSA released some intercepts with communications from Khashoggi's phone to others, and that contained an intercept of communication between Khashoggi's phone and KBS's phone. Within 24 hours of that information being released by the NSA, KBS, what's the proper verb, did a tweeted the following message: "I've not spoken to Khashoggi. I only texted him, and my last text was October 26, 2017. Something like why put the date in? That's weird. So the best investigator in the world, who knows more about al-Qaeda terror financing than 100 people combined, I said, "John, what happened that day?" He said, "Oh, that's the day that one of our investigators met with Khashoggi in D.C. Because Khashoggi was, part of the intelligence community. We knew he knew a lot about Saudi government involvement in 9/11. And he said, "Would you come to New York and talk to my boss?" He said, "Yeah, I would do that." So I'm sure that as soon as she left, he called KBS and said, "Look, the 9/11 lawyers are on to me. They know that I know what you guys did." Now, I didn't give him anything. but you're holding my kid in Saudi Arabia? You harm one hair on his head, and I will. So my belief is Khashoggi was killed not because he was a dissident, it's a lot of dissidents, but because he was holding this axe over the Saudis' head. So our fight continues. I could be doing this, for another 10 or 15 years, but I am hopeful that, with the enthusiasm and aid and support by people in Washington, we can kind of break through and bring Saudi Arabia to the table, because I know eventually they're going to lose, and engaging sooner would be better than all these details eventually coming out. So should I stop now and do some questions?
Hey folks, just a quick reminder that back in 2008 and 9, a lot of people lost all of their retirement savings and their 401ks and IRAs because they did not own gold and silver. Yeah, that's right. Gold and silver protects you from a market crash. So do yourself a favor, protect your retirement by purchasing gold and silver. You can go to moneymetals.com, reach out to them, and they will help you set yourself up to protect you and your family from having to start all over from scratch. If you're a first-time buyer and you spend more than $100, use promo code PIMPY, P-I-M-P-Y, and they will send along with your order a free half-ounce of silver. So folks, do yourself a favor, head on over to moneymetals.com and protect you and your family from a market crash, as well as inflation.
AM 590, The Answer.
Okay, after stopping this video with the statements from the attorney for the victims and family members of 9/11, Jim Kreindler, there are a couple of things to point out. I'm going to be doing a little bit of commentary. There's one thing that I think is of critical importance on what he said. He said that just a small number, not that many, it's a small number of regular citizens, the citizens, American citizens, the victims and family members of 9/11 are basically taking the proverbial bull by the horns, and they're fighting things in federal court. They're doing lawsuits because of the ongoing 20 years plus now that's going on in Guantanamo Bay at GTMO is still in pretrial situation. And quite frankly, I know that they're all kind of fed up. They know a lot of things that are happening. And so Jim Kreindler and the others are doing many things for how many years? I know starting since 2012, actually, and they finally did a lawsuit in 2016, have been trying to get those names of Saudi officials. And remember, he mentioned there are 11 of them. Get at least the main one, the top one that was mentioned in federal court in 2012, released, unredacted. So people can at least know who that was, number one. Number two, why isn't this individual, since we have KSM et al., Khalik Sheikh Mohammed, and the 4 others, total of 5 being tried in Gitmo right now, Khalik Sheikh Mohammed being touted as the mastermind of 9/11, when we find out that there is a Saudi official whose name was redacted. They've been trying for many, many years to get it released, but have not been able to do so. They are taking the bull by the horns. And the reason Jim Kreindler made this video, again, I said, remember the date. The date that the video was made, do you remember that date? Was right after the announcement from then Attorney General Barr. This video was made on October 28th, 2019. Well, it was on September 12th, 2019. They had taken everything all the way up to the top, to Attorney General Barr. And Attorney General Barr was given the final date of September 12th, 2019, to make a decision whether or not to release that name. And that name, of course, I said, sure, we'll release it, but we're going to do it under seal, and we're going to give it to the attorney which was Jim Kreindler, of the victims and family members of 9/11. We will give it to the defense team of KSM et al., Khalik Sheikh Mohammed et al., and we will give it to the legal representation for Saudi Arabia, legal representation from Saudi Arabia. Okay, very interesting. So it was just what? A month or two after that. It was not even a month after that. But Jim Kreindler made this video. You can tell he is not happy. And the victims and family members are getting more done and finding out information than what's being accomplished in close to 20 years, over 20 years of what's been happening in GTMO. Well, there's a couple other things I'm just going to bring up before closing out. And that is, I'm going to give you a couple of dates for consideration. Because even though Jim Kreindler can't release that name, there is a couple of things you can do to connect the dots. I want to remind you that it was on October 1st, 2017. That was the date of the Las Vegas massacre. On June 21st, 2017, who became the new crown prince? The old crown prince was Al-Walid bin Talal, also called Mohammed bin Nayef. Mohammed bin Nayef was deposed, arrested on June 21st, 2017, along with a number of other individuals there in Saudi Arabia. You have to look at that number. That's something that you're going to have to consider. How many did Jim say that they knew about? Well, there were quite a few businessmen and Saudi officials that were arrested on that day. And of course, many other things happened after that. But also on that day, on June 21st, 2017, Mohammed bin Salman, who was the deputy crown prince earlier, became the new crown prince. June 21st, 2017. The Las Vegas massacre happened October 1st, 2017. Now, what is also interesting is who was one of the people that was arrested during that time? Previous crown prince, billionaire Saudi Prince Al-Walid bin Talal. He was arrested in the corruption crackdown. In fact, in a news article on CNBC that was released on November 5th, 2017, it states Al-Walid bin Talal, a member of the Saudi royal family, was reportedly detained on Saturday. Saudi Arabia's royal family ousted key officials and arrested others in a sweeping anti-corruption drive. Bin Talal is a very prominent investor with stakes in companies like Citigroup, Apple, and Twitter, just to name a few. Okay, so going to be a matter of doing a little bit of critical thinking and paying very close attention that it is we, the people, the normal, everyday American citizen, that is obviously going to have to take the bull by the horn, like the very courageous individuals, people like Jim, and also the victims and family members of 9/11. So that is something that we maybe better think about. If we're going to get things done, we need to step up and start doing what we can do legally and are making our voices heard. See you next week on cvine.com, c-vine.com for CVine News.